Previous discussion, we had looked at the NIST standards, specifically Special Publication is 137, and today we are looking at information around step 2.2, risk management, the risk management steps and structure. And I wanted to just make sure that I clearly state that the information around governance, risk, and compliance is, like I mentioned earlier, is what drives pretty much all the work that is going on in information security engineering, incident response, contingency planning, and all whatnot. So the the importance of governance, risk, and compliance is cannot be overstated because whether it is a private institution, a government institution, or quasi-government institution, conversations around managing the information security program of an organization is paramount because there is a lot that rides on it. One, a reputation can be completely damaged, lives can be lost, individuals and individuals can be severely harmed, like we've seen in the case of many breaches. But organizations that are unable to put in a security program in place to help minimize the effects of potential breaches or compromise usually would have to take up the liability or they will have to pay a very high premium in terms of, and sometimes the premium might be going to the insurance firms who might be managing that in the event that occurs, or the premium might be in direct payments to victims of their carelessness. So most organizations want to have a strategy around which they can manage their information security program. And the management of the information security program starts, or I would say cybersecurity in itself is driven by, to a large extent, the organizational business need. But even if there is an organizational business need, there's usually a structure that drives how they go about doing what they need to do. So the risk management framework, much as it is mainly government driven to meet the objective of the government in terms of modernizing their information security program, putting themselves in a position to be able to both protect, detect, respond, and minimize whatever issue might be associated with a potential compromise. They decided that a risk-based approach is the better is a good approach to take. And of course, we know that NIST is the organization that has been able to develop that approach. So the initial part of this document, NIST 137, speaks to most of that in terms of what their fundamentals, in terms of the organizations that are involved, in terms of the target audience. And of course, the publication also refers to most of the privacy programs in terms of the legal background, the laws, and the acts that are in place that leads all the way to the need to have a standard that can help in meeting compliance with those laws. I know that to a large extent, most organizations and individuals are advocating for information security folks, and they sell ideas around having to go learn one or two programming. Those are very important skills to have because they are the ones that enable and provides visibility for those who are particularly involved in governance, risk, and compliance to see exactly what's going on. But in terms of the commitment of resources, both human and otherwise, is done really at the governance level, that is at the highest leadership level of an organization, which is why having participating in cybersecurity does not necessarily mean that you are involved directly in the engineering aspect. You could be involved in cybersecurity by participating in governance, risk, and compliance. So the risk management framework, like we have discussed multiple times, is one methodology out of many. But again, organizations look at this, both private and otherwise, they look at it and feel, okay, this is speaking mainly to a government audience. But the truth is, it is not. Because in terms of both experience of working for many private entities and organizations, some of the key things that I have noticed is the the government, to a large extent, has a program that is much more effective than many private entities. Some of the private entities pick up on the government's approach in terms of implementing cybersecurity program to modernize or modify that to meet their own specific business needs. But even at that, most of it is usually at a very, very surface level. So in terms of the implementation of the approach that the government is using in managing its own information security program, the risk management framework is the be all and the most effective tool I've seen so far. They've had previous programs like DARCAP and all the other associated frameworks, but all organizations, including military and private civilian agencies, I would say civilian agencies rather than private, they're all required to migrate in and start implementing the risk management framework. So like I said, the risk management framework in itself is to help um, provide linkages between the business and the objective of the organization, the modernization of their information systems, the components and the services, the enterprise architecture, how to manage it, and how to be able to, at the same time, standardize, optimize, and consolidate all the various programs that are going on at the same time to be able to provide both reporting such that they can conduct their mission and business in an effective way, to provide visibility into what is going on in the enterprise, from what is going on from development. Because right now, it's not just about cybersecurity engineering. We're also having to involve vendors, stakeholders. We're having to involve developers of applications and the associated factors like databases. We're having to involve testers in cybersecurity in the cybersecurity program because the whole supply chain of IT delivery within an organization has to be involved in cybersecurity, which is why concepts like DevSecOps is being proposed as the best approach that organizations should definitely adopt in terms of having their security uh, baked in rather than having their security bolted on. In most cases, and especially with regards to new technologies and new solutions, some of them even raving technologies and solutions that people utilize globally are usually created with the customer first in mind and not caring about the security component of that product, which is why products like Facebook, products like TikTok, and all the others are prone to one or two shenanigans associated with people's data or information that is being collected. Their main idea and target is the business end, and right now they're having to scramble to find people that will be able to support their information security program. To a large extent, for those who are entering into the cybersecurity program from the start, even in governance, risk, and compliance, it is usually and mainly, even though that is not the limited area where people participate in governance, risk, and compliance in information security, is in the area of working as an analyst or as a specialist. And most of the analytical work is in terms of collecting data, being able to present that data, be able to align the data to the organizational goals, be able to generate reports that will be able to provide, understand specifically the kind of data you're looking for, who the points of contacts might be, the sources of those data, the usefulness of the data in terms of helping organizations make a decision. You also have to understand what it means to be able to filter the data in a way that is both that is meaningful to the overall program. Certain pieces of data that an analyst might encounter might not be relevant in terms of reporting upwards because you have to both filter the information and understand what it means to the bottom line. So those are some of the key approaches. The risk management framework provides you that key tool that enables this idea and so much more. Within the risk management framework, you're going to have to interact with different roles and responsibility within the organization. You're going to interact with those who might be directly involved in the risk management process, but probably not the risk management of the organization, but probably not in terms of what it is in a day-to-day basis or in cybersecurity from a cybersecurity perspective. But you'll be involved with those who are involved in risk management from the business perspective, right? They are more interested in the business ideas, business objective. What products do you buy or sell? What services do you buy or sell? What are the risks associated with that? Um, Whether they are also considering the risk that might accrue from managing even their own personnel. So from an organizational risk management, which is why to a large extent you hear in cybersecurity, they'll tell you that you need to interact with the risk management function. That risk management function could as well be those who are involved in the day-to-day running, whereas the risk management executive are those who are the risk management executive are those who are involved at the highest level of the organization because they operate mainly at the governance board, at the board level, and they are able to contribute and speak to certain things from a perspective that the board or the leadership of the organization will take seriously. The boring part of the governance, risk, and compliance, of course, is that you have to deal with the mission. You have to understand the business ramification. You have to understand the business environment. You have to understand the business components. You have to understand to a large extent most of what people are doing within the organization and how it affects the bottom line and the interrelationship between those types of conversations and what is going on with their information security program, and for you to be able to create and form a relationship between you and them that are managing the business. That means you also have to understand how to speak cybersecurity in business terms, not the other way around. Because those who are involved in cybersecurity engineering and sit in the other room, they will come and tell you, hey, look, we have, they will speak to you in technical terms. Your system has had a particular API that is not connecting to source data or it's not connecting to a database. The leadership of the organization is not interested in wanting to know that. They're interested in wanting to know if their business is secured or not. They're interested in wanting to know if they're still going to make their target at the end of the month or the quarter or at the end of the year. Because at the end of the day, if it's a publicly traded company, if it doesn't make profit, the stock would plummet. And of course, that affects the bottom line of the organization. That is their priority, that is their interest, that is what they're interested in wanting to know. So there are certain roles in cybersecurity right now that is very prevalent in mainly private entities. They call it Business Information Security Officer, BISO. That particular role is a role that allows you to be able to perform this function and not necessarily be involved in information security engineering. There are many roles that allows you to be able to do this. Some of them may not necessarily be a BISO role, but there are certain things that you might be involved with the organization, both in terms of, you might just be involved in terms of IT risk, in terms of working with the governance risk and compliance tools, picking up risks that have been reported, adding them to the risk register if it is not automated, analyzing the data that is coming from the risk register, working with individuals within the organizations to be able to understand and identify how those risks can be mitigated, what options are available. Because at the end of the day, you have to be able to provide that information to management to say, okay, we understand specifically what you're saying. We understand that there is financial priorities associated with this. We can make a decision and say, okay, are we moving forward with this or not? Which is why there's also the need to continue to work with risk management executives because they are the ones who might have been involved in terms of both tailoring and engineering both the risk threshold and presenting what it means to be able to make risk decision across the enterprise. Some risk decisions can be made at the business unit level. Some risk decision can be made at the departmental level. Some risk decisions can only be made at the enterprise level. And by enterprise level, I mean at the organization, the highest level of the organization. Many organizations will tell you that they have risk, they do have risk tiers. And some of those risk tiers is tailored to the needs and the business needs of the organization. So that risk tier or the risk threshold, and of course the risk appetite of the organization might not be interested in wanting to expose itself to a certain level of risk, given the potential damage it could cause both to the bottom line and to the business, to the reputation, to people's lives, and so many other factors. They might be more interested in wanting to say, okay, within that particular risk threshold or the risk appetite of the organization, your risk management framework helps to tailor what you are doing in information security to align to that organizational level risk. They have different level of risk. There's the frontline risk managers. There's the second level risk organization. There are different levels of organizational risk management an organization can choose to implement and put in place. So that in itself provides a broad-based overview as to what and how the risk management framework fits into the grand scheme of things in terms of how do they continue to how do you make use of it, how, if you understand it right now, how can you interpret this risk management framework in a government setting, in a quasi government setting, in a non-governmental setting. And the non-governmental setting might involve both private, non-profit, and even individual requirements. Those requirements should be interpreted to meet your own specific and unique level. So the risk management framework helps you to prioritize assets, identify your assets, know what your assets, information technology assets are, and some of them might not be the traditional IT assets that we know. In many organizations, there's the interaction and the interrelationship between physical security in the organization, your door lock within the organization, defenses you have around the organization, to information security within the organization, and the data that is within the system. To a large extent, the importance of such is that the importance of such extends to the extent that organizations are even more interested as well in wanting to speak with, in even making sure that other uh, businesses or information systems that they interact with meet their own exacting standards. And that is in most cases when they are dealing with either proprietary information, confidential information, or any sensitive, compartmentalized information. Those are all pieces of information that might require that if you're interacting with other systems, you also have to make sure that they also have security safeguards in place. And those are some of the reasons why you hear organizations tell you things like, oh, we're working with organizations and we want them to have, we need to do third party risk assessment. This is all not too far away from the idea that if you're having to deal with either proprietary information or any kind of information that is classified in any of those classes, that the information you are sharing, you are receiving, or the information you are sending meets that the information system is positioned is configured and secured enough to be able to both handle the transmission, the processing, and the storage of those pieces of data. So the understanding of threats to information system and organization is something that the risk management framework does really well. The understanding of the potential adverse effect of of any activity on the system what it can have on an individual is also there. The risk management framework helps you to conduct organization and system level risk assessment. Again, we're back to the same thing that we're talking about at the organizational level and at the risk level. The organization might do its own risk assessment, which may not necessarily be consistent with what you're looking for if you're interested in looking at a system level risk. And when we talk about systems, sometimes people think about it as a laptop. It's not a laptop or a desktop. And it could potentially be one system that has so many subsystems under it, right? So for example, within an organization, within a department, or within an organization, there are enterprise systems. That can be one system. You can count that as one system. But within that one system, you have HR systems, you have accounting systems, you have so many other departmental and business level risks. Within the business level, At the same time, there are multiple systems. Some of those systems might be hosted within the premises of the organization. It might be in one of the data warehouses that is managed, that is owned or managed by the organization. It could be in a cloud, in a public-based data center. So those are different levels of risk, and each of those systems have their own specific characteristics. And some of those characteristics are such that the level of risk assessment you're going to perform on them will differ. The kind of data that goes into the information system differs, so you have to perform a different level of risk assessment based on the data. You also have to look at, okay, how is this information being transmitted to you? Those are all important factors that is involved. Organizations might not necessarily have only their operational systems. They could also have systems that they have stored somewhere as their backup plan, right? Say, for example, their contingency plan. In the event that there is a natural disaster, can they set up their business and start their business somewhere? These are all details that would subsequently get to see in other parts of as we go through this entire process. But bottom line is, at the end of the day, when you're thinking about the risk management framework, you have to understand that the risk management framework is one of the major tools that allows you to both identify and prioritize security and privacy requirements. It helps you to understand the boundary of your information system, what is within your own control and what is under someone else's control, and at the same time, what control both of you share. The risk management framework helps you to define your information systems in terms of the enterprise architecture. It helps you to develop the security and privacy architecture that includes controls suitable for inheritance by systems. So
Can I ask you a question as you were talking about
sure.
the importance of GRC in developing solutions? Let's think about this current issue with Twitter and there being lots of bot accounts, as they call it. Do you think an emphasis on GRC might have helped them at some point if they'd focused on it more?
I want to believe so. I want to believe that it is part of the issue, and to a large extent, it is not too far away from precisely what we have been talking about. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay. All right. So as we look at some of the risk management frameworks, with the understanding the risk management framework itself, the 7 steps as mentioned, start with the preparation, the categorization, selection, implementation, assessment of information systems, authorization, monitoring of information systems. These pieces of information again operates in a cyclical manner, in that your categorization, your preparation is right dead smack in the middle of the entire process, because it contributes to the entire 6 steps that is associated with the risk management framework. The categorization of your information system, as mentioned, you need to know specifically what you're going to store in that system. You need to know the impact if there's going to be any potential compromise of that system. And at the same time, you need to understand what kind of risk is involved. That way, it helps you to make a determination of the selection of controls that you're going to implement in that information system. The selection of those controls might not be too far away from the fact that you have categorized your system, the controls that are going to be applicable to systems. If it is considered a higher risk system, it's not going to be the same type of controls that would be applicable if the system is considered a lower risk information system. Once you do the selection, it's more or less like you are still planning. Once you select them, you've made your good plan. Time for you to implement. You have to implement those controls. You have to go into the information system and look at some of the technical requirements that are there, and say, okay, if no one is using this system after 5 minutes, I want this system to lock itself, or probably go into a screen lock mode. That in itself is one example of implementing control. Say, for example, If anyone wants to open this system and wants to create a password, the password cannot be 1234, or the password cannot be password as the word password, you know. So you have to make sure that, those requirements are implemented in the information system. And these are just very basic examples, you know. And once you implement those controls in terms of saying, okay, nobody should put a password as a password or 1234 as a password, you have to perform an assessment. And that assessment process involves coming into the system, probably waiting for that 5 minutes to see if the system will lock in the first place. Then you also have to make sure that, okay, if a user is going to create a password, the password is not password. You test it and see, can I create a password, name password? If you do that and you're successful, that means that the implementation of the controls on that information system hasn't been successful. There are multiple ways of performing assessment because it involves the particular methodology. Now, the fact that I'm going through this with in a very fast manner does not minimize both the importance and the depth of work that is involved with each of these activity. Each of these activity consists of several multiple steps that are both complex and some of them simple, but also requires a high level of interaction with different stakeholders and actors within the organization, as the case might be. Now, the inability of a lot of organizations to implement the risk management framework, again, is not too far away from what I just mentioned right now. The question of personnel, the question of resources. A lot of them do not have the resources to implement the risk management framework as it is tailored right now. So they implement a variation of it. Some of them are not able to perform any segregation of duties because some of these activities require segregation of duty. I cannot be the one who implements the particular control and I'm assessing the control. You understand what I mean? So if I'm the one that implements the control, I can come back and tell you, oh, everything is fine, 100%. Everything works, right? You know.
Mhm.
But the other part of it as well is once you make this assessment, you're going to have to generate a report. You are going to have to present a posture report, a status report of that information system. And that status report is going to be presented to someone who is authorized to be able to make a decision and say, okay, even though we recognize the limitation associated with this information system, it is okay right now for us to go ahead and do the needful, and that needful is implement that information security program. All right. Uh, okay. So after you do the authorization and you have authorization complete, someone has to monitor it, and the monitoring of that information system is precisely how and where we need to make sure that we have several tools and solutions in place that can help us to make sure that whatever it is that we have implemented, we've selected, and the assessment is as expected. Now, the details of this is what we're going to go through one after the other, and just going to start with the prepare. And we'll just give an illustrative example of what it means to prepare an information system within the risk management framework. Okay. Um, the risk management framework, before I get started on the other side, is essential in terms of helping to also fulfill a particular program of the federal government. And one of the tools that they have been able to develop is the cyber security framework, or the CSF. What they have been able to develop within the CSF is such that it helps to categorize or select controls and put them in a bucket, in several buckets that are implemented, that also helps the federal government get a visibility into how it is executing those specific items. And I think we had a brief discussion during one of our sessions in terms of looking at the cybersecurity framework. Again, that is just an aside to give you an idea of how the risk management framework fits into several activities that the federal government is more interested in. And of course, some of these ideas can also be tailored to meet private entities' concerns and requirements, because to a large extent, they almost always seek and ask for consulting organizations to come in and support their project and their program. And typically, most of the consulting companies, this is what they refer to in terms of providing those solutions. But much of this document is a publicly available document. There is a rigor associated with the implementation of this particular activity. As mentioned earlier, within the prepare step, again, the purpose of the prepare step is to carry out essential activities at the organization's mission and business process and information system level of the organization to help prepare the organization to manage its security and privacy risks using the risk management framework. Now, within the prepared task at the organizational level, there is a summary of activities, a total of about 7 subtasks that needs to be carried out. And each of these subtasks in itself are, again, when organizations implement this, they have to be able to document some of the information and activities associated with this in a governance, risk, and compliance tool. Some of those governance, risk, and compliance tools, they vary. There are a plethora of them out there, and each one is claiming to perform one activity or another. And the implementation of some of those activities that organizations say they do has to be such that it is available during audit, which is why you need some of that information. If a business owner of an organization tells you, "Oh, we implement an information security program," they have all the alibi they need, but they are not able to provide, or they verbally claim to have the alibi, but they are unable to provide hard documentary evidence that can be traceable to one accountable person or another. It becomes a problem for the organization during audit. That means that they're not doing what they claim to do, and probably the resources that they may have expended in trying to do that would have been a waste. Now, in preparing the task and the outcomes at the organizational level, you have to identify risk management roles, as mentioned earlier. Those are individuals that have been identified and assigned key roles for executing the risk management framework. An organization must define those roles. Those roles are also defined to a large extent within this document, as we're looking in several other pages far behind. They speak to who has the authority to do what in greater detail. In preparing, you also have to have a risk management strategy. Why are you implementing the risk management framework in the first place? A risk management strategy for the organization.
Sorry, Sunday, just one quick question. So
Yes.
Under that that first row for outcomes, in parentheses it says cybersecurity framework IDAM-6. I know last time you showed us where those documents are. Could you just remind me again where those documents are?
Okay. Yeah. The documents are not too far away from here, and I think they're somewhere in one of those links. Even if they are not, we can just do this, and we should be able to have that open. I think I shared the link. It's called NIST Cybersecurity CSF.tools. We go to CSF.tools, which will potentially take us away from this page. Not a problem. Can stop. All right. Here you are. This is the CSF.tools. Is a NIST tool that has been made available, and of course, some of the items there is a lot of visualization tools available that you could potentially use as well. And there are many of the links here as well that point you to the different versions of the the cybersecurity framework. It's in version 1.1 right now. Just skip through the different cybersecurity posture, the overview, risk management document, and of course, this identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. These are additional conversations that we can have later in the future and form a relationship between that and what's going on within the risk management framework and how they fit into this particular classification category. That works?
Yep.
Yes. So CSF, cybersecurity framework. All right. So with the preparation level is quite an intense level of activity that needs to be done. It requires organization committing resources to be able to both develop a risk management strategy and have that risk management strategy authorized and approved. Given it's a strategy, you can be rest assured that it's an interaction that's going to have to happen at the highest level of the organization, given that it's a strategic document. Those documents have to be reviewed, they have to be approved, it has to address some of the key items associated with risk management within the organization. And those key items associated with risk management is not limited to the risk appetite, the risk threshold. And most of those risk threshold is usually delineated or denoted in a dollar figure, which is one of the key items I typically tell people who are struggling with getting the organization to respond to their risk discussion, that once you're able to denote whatever it is that you're doing in technical terms or in a dollar figure or in a monetary figure, you get the attention of management, because once they see the figure, they easily pay attention to it. And the risk management strategy falls within the cybersecurity framework ID risk management and ID SC. The meaning of SC escapes me at this time, but yeah, this is a key tool that is required for you to prepare from the very beginning. The organization is also required to do a risk assessment. An organization-wide risk assessment is required, so you can, or if there's an existing one, it needs to be updated. That way, you can capture what is going on within the organization and to determine areas where the organization might require. Is key as it is a key indicator and provides insight into the posture of the organization, what it does and how it does what it does, and whether it is vulnerable to one or two potential compromises. The organizationally tailored control baselines and cybersecurity framework profile. So this is an optional requirement that's P4. But organizations typically should have a list of controls that they consider baseline controls. And what we say baseline controls is that at the very least, our doors should have a lock. And at the very least, the lock should be a specific manufacturer or a specific product that meets certain specification. It doesn't have to be a specific manufacturer, but a specific product that meets certain specification. That is just an example of a baseline. Or the baseline of a house, for example, at least it should have windows, it should have doors, it should be comfortable, it should protect you from the elements. Whether it does have a wooden floor or carpet, those are all additional items that that an individual can choose to put in their own homes. Whether the house has an indoor jacuzzi or somewhere you can just shower, those are all factors that you have to take into consideration. So that's just an example of what the organizational tailored control baselines and cybersecurity framework profile should be. The cybersecurity framework, again, that as we mentioned, is a CSF. It should be a framework that it works across both. So you need to have that in place. What is the idea? What is the whole idea of implementing or having a door at home? Is to prevent, right? Even if it is not to prevent, within the cybersecurity framework profile, it is to prevent. Within the cybersecurity framework profile, it is also, you can say, okay, if we have a door, the reason why we're preventing as well, it could also serve to help. I don't think it will detect. Okay, for example, you have a camera at home, a security camera at home. That what was the need of having the security camera? The security camera is to also detect, right? And it could also work as a preventative measure. because someone can see the security camera that has an evil intent and be like, oh no, I don't want my face captured. I don't want to go close to the camera. Again, people have different ways of doing different things. Sometimes the detection mechanism doesn't do much, but it is what it is. Uh, the common control identification is if within the organization there are different units, there are controls, for example, that could be implemented at the enterprise level. You need to know what those controls are. What is enterprise providing for us? Are they providing for us a centralized HR resource or a centralized HR repository where the name of all the employees and all the departments can be stored? That is a control that is going to be provided by an external body. But within the HR, they might want to implement a particular system that utilizes the same tool that has been provided by enterprise. But they have to implement controls that some of the controls they will just inherit from the enterprise, but there are also controls that they would have to implement on their own. So, but whatever is being provided for you at the central level, that is a common control, you have to identify that. But if you are collecting the control or making use of the control from a different organization, what you're doing is that you're inheriting the control from that organization. And the inheritance of that control, you have to be able to identify which one is available for you, which one is inherited. You have to also document that and make that widely available across the enterprise. So when anyone wants to implement that type of information, that type of system, they will find out if some of those controls are already implemented, so they don't waste both time and resources trying to implement that type of control. All right. Now, of course, within the same preparation stage, you have to start thinking about impact level prioritization. Why are you going to what is where and why? If there is a breach, how level, what are the level of a particular breach apart from another one? Say, for example, there's a compromise somewhere, or if there's a vulnerability somewhere, how do you categorize them? How do you think about the impacts it can have on your organization? So a prioritization organizational system with the same impact level is conducted. You need to know the different levels of impact in the event of a breach to the organizational information system. Those are very important tools. Then in tax 7, there is a continuous monitoring strategy organization. You need to know who is involved in managing and handling the organization's organization-wide strategy for monitoring control effectiveness, and to ensure that with them they work together with you to make sure that those things are implemented. Those are key tools that help you to work within the organization to resolve matters that may eventually crop its head. So the preparation level, again, another summary, but the level of activity that needs to be conducted at each stage here is a slew of activities, interacting with different stakeholders, interacting and having understanding of the different resources that are available, that are documented and identified and stored within a centralized location, so you can easily access those when you start implementing the bulk of the heavy lifting in terms of the implementation of the risk management framework is done at the preparation level. So you might spend a considerable amount of time looking at the preparation, identifying roles, identifying the task, identifying the resources before you're able to carry out each of the activity. And the example here that is also provided within the organization, within this document, how it is organized. It tells you about one, the particular activity, risk management, risk assessment organization, which is also what we're seeing here, task P3, risk assessment organization. You need to understand the potential inputs. What are the key tools you will bring into play to help you achieve your risk assessment? What you're going to have to bring in here and to achieve your risk assessment is that you need to have a risk management strategy, which is one of the documents we refer to here. You need to have a mission and business objectives clearly defined, which is part of the organization's governance document, policy and governance document. You need to understand the mission and the business objective. What are we doing? Are we selling sugar? Are we selling salt? Why do we need to sell salt? What is our bottom line for selling salt? Are we selling salt to make the world a better place or to make sure that all food tastes delicious? Those are the kinds of examples in terms of why you need to understand the business objective. Okay, why are we selling the salt? Is it simply because we love everybody, we want to give them free money, or is it because we exist to be able to make business? You have to understand that those bottom lines as well. Then you need to understand that if the organization is selling salt or sugar, or what are the current threats, current threat information? Are there other businesses that are interested in taking over your business? Are there organizations that are working very, very hard to make sure that whatever sugar you're able to collect, or the information about when you collect your sugar, they don't go there to hijack it? They might, how are they going to find out about that information? Is it going to be through your information system? You need to understand some of those types of threat information that exist out there. Is it going to be the threat information? Is it that your employees they talk a lot about the things that's going on in your business plan out and publicly? They are not circumspect in talking about the business. Those are the kinds of threat information you want to be able to identify. The system level and security, privacy, and risk assessment result is an activity that you would have carried out at the system level. You would have performed the system level risk assessment. Performing that system level risk assessment uh, and privacy assessment. Of course, after you've done that, you're going to have results, and those results, they are part of the information you're going to have to bring to the table to help you do the work that you need to do. There's also the supply chain risk assessment results. You need to also perform a supply chain risk assessment. If there is a previous organization-led security and privacy risk assessment results, you need to bring that to the table. If you have information sharing agreements with different organizations, most of the time, say for example, you want to be able to extract certain health information from Center for Medicaid, or the Department of Health and Human Services. You're going to have an information sharing agreement because they will tell you what you can do with the data, what you cannot do with the data. You need to be able to capture all that data, that information in an information sharing agreement, or it could also be a memorandum of understanding. Capturing that memorandum of understanding is a key tool that you bring into play when you're performing your risk assessment, because you also know what the potential liabilities are there in the event of a breach, because sometimes they might demand that there should be a cure, or sometimes they might put a moratorium, or probably decide that, okay, for a certain level, for a certain number of years, you cannot interact with them. And if you cannot interact with them, probably that data might be critical to your business. How do you protect that data that is critical to your business and make sure that you remain in business? Those are the kinds of documents that you need to be able to review when you review those in detail. There's also the security and privacy information from continuous monitoring. Probably it's called the Security Operations Center. They are the ones that might be able to provide you with additional information in that regard. You bring all these pieces of information together to be able to reach an organizational risk assessment result. That's the expected output because you're performing an organizational risk assessment. The organizational risk assessment is the bringing together of all this information, synthesizing them, bringing out what is key and what is important for you to achieve your organizational risk assessment result. That organizational risk assessment result, even though it's an output here, is going to be an input to another problem, right? And there are key people that are involved. We have a senior accountable official for risk assessment. It could be the risk manager. It could be the risk vice president. The organizations decide as the case might be. There's also the risk executive function. In the government setting, there's a senior agency information security officer. In the private setting, it could just be a senior information security officer. There's also the senior agency official for privacy, if there is one already existing within the organization. These are all the people you're going to have to interact with to achieve your goal.
Sorry, Sandy, can I ask a question? So
Yes.
with all these input documents, have you? What if they don't exist then? What
They,
if?
they will have to they will have to be created because they are critical input in trying to achieve this level of detail and
Okay.
meeting. That is part of the due diligence that needs to be done. If you are going to do this work, there is a certain level of rigor and due diligence that needs to be put into place. Because if you're not able to do this, that means whatever risk assessment framework or whatever decision you're making and information you're providing to someone who is going to authorize the use of this system is going to be an incomplete set of information.
Right.
Right. So if the information is not robust enough to be able to cover the basis, and at the very least, even if there is none, there should be someone who will write and say this document does not exist. All right. And you can do your own risk assessment based on this limited set of information. Because at the end of the day, if whatever happens to this information system, you would eventually be traced all the way back to this place to identify what you did or what you did not do.
Okay. And so are there people who specialize in doing these kinds of things? Like, for example, let's say there is no system level security and privacy risk assessment results. Are there people that specialize in doing that?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
okay.
That in itself is a different and a whole and a complete function in terms of providing that level of risk assessment for organizations who are trying to do this. So an organization might tell you that they're a consulting firm. This is all part of the activity that they do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
And each one of these could be a key, just a role that has been assigned that an individual is there to perform risk assessment. That is or her own work.
Okay, I see. So I can imagine that the scope of an engagement can quickly expand if it turns out that some of these potential inputs don't exist then.
Correct. Correct. Because you could say, okay, we're trying to make sure that we have activity A, B, C, or D. We need to perform, we need to make sure that your organization is in a good shape and help. And once you do that, you discover that this is missing, that is missing, the other one is missing. The business is like, okay, can you help us resolve this issue? And your engagement might expand. Be like, okay, this is a business request right now. We need to be able to talk to our business officials and expand the business or probably modify whatever contract you're giving us to be able to meet some of this. And sometimes it might just be that they just want to understand their posture, right? They want to understand where they are, and that is just all they need. So yeah, that might just be all.
And so these kinds of services, like the big four consulting firms, would this be the kinds of things that they
This
can
is
do
the
in-house?
kind they do. This is what they do. This is
Okay.
what they do.
All right.
Again, my experience working both at Deloitte and EY and all the other companies, this is what the Big Four is either brought in to do or we were called to do for organizations. Right?
Okay. Got it.
That involves interacting with a lot of people who don't know what you're talking about. Once you start talking to them, they're looking at you. What's he talking about?
Hmm.
Okay, so you have to interpret whatever it is that you're saying as simple as these terms might appear, you also have to break it down into what type of document for
Yeah.
most business unit owners to understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I imagine it's bad news for a client if they don't have these documents, but then it's good news for the big four. It's more work that they can bill for, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's more work that you can do for it. And these are the reasons why I say if you're in cyber, the fact that your mindset, you already have a great mindset in having an understanding of how you can engage with these clients. Because at the end of the day, as a senior manager, you understand these things. So it's the analysts that will run around and do the analysts and the specialists that will run around and do the work of pulling together this document and continue to provide guidance to the senior management or whoever the business owner might be in the organization. So as a senior person, you will not be, you understand specifically what is required. You might be involved in the review of the document, whether it meets the objectives of that work or not. But the analyst will do the running around in terms of coupling together something for the organization.
Okay.
Yeah. And as you do it, sometimes giving that they might just say that, oh, all we want is an assessment posture. The fact that you perform the assessment posture and you understand the weaknesses of the organization for a big four, it is an avenue for you to also propose business opportunities again for your organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the risk assessment at the organizational level leverages the aggregated information, like I mentioned, from the potential input, information from the information here is the result of the continuous management strategy, the strategic risk consideration of the organization. The organization considers the totality of the risk from the operation and the use of its information system, from information exchange and connection, and to other internally and externally owned systems. And from the use of external providers. For example, the organization may review the risk related to its enterprise architecture and information system or varying impact level residing in the same network, and whether higher impact systems are segregated from lower impact systems, or systems operated and maintained by external TIC providers. The organization may also consider the viability of environment that may exist within the organization. For example, different locations serving different mission and business processes, and the needs to account for such variability in risk assessment. A risk assessment of the organization's supply chain may be conducted as well. Risk assessment results may be used to help organizations establish a cybersecurity framework profile. So and also the beauty of it is it also provides you a reference, right? A reference of all the different organizational levels. There's organizational level, there's business and mission process level. Those are all important things to take into consideration. But again, what you see here, we would eventually encounter this risk organization down the line, but it's just giving you a structure of how this process is set up. All right. The the grand scheme in terms of again, we've discussed this in terms of the OMB Circular A130, the information security and privacy in the RMF, it's also being catered for. Privacy is a different animal, even though it contributes to, it's part of information security, but by other standards, it's also a standalone, because privacy is a matter that involves all um, pretty much everyone. But in terms of the implementation within the risk management framework, there's a perspective which we need to have, but it doesn't stand in isolation. Um, there is a high level of collaboration between the information security program and privacy programs. The privacy program is a complete program by itself. It doesn't exist as a subset of information security program. There is a high level of interaction between both programs, the information security program and the privacy program. So you can choose to specialize simply in the privacy program aspect of an organization and you're good to go. You can have a job, but your job is not necessarily information security, but you can also blend your understanding of information security and the privacy program as well to help support what you're doing. Right? Okay. So overall, as we look at some of these documents, I want to make sure that we have both a common understanding of where we are at and how we'll continue to move forward in terms of the review of these documents. Some key documents in terms of what we're trying to do here is the OMB A130. The RMF process stems from the OMB A130. And if you look at the OMB A130, you have a general understanding of what the key driver of the risk management framework is. And it is always, almost always referenced. And we're talking about privacy. The OMB A130 is a key tool and it defines privacy control as administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. I wanted to mention somewhere along the line that when we talk about controls, there are different types of controls. And some of those controls, it's administrative control, technical control, and fiscal control or fiscal safeguard, as the case might be. Administrative control could be your HR policy, your business policy, your all manner of policies that has been implemented within an organization. The HR policy, the use policy, acceptable use policy, as an example, within the organization. Those are examples of administrative controls. Example of a technical control is what we mentioned earlier, that you can log into the system, a number of passwords and special characters. The password has expiry date and all whatnot. Physical safeguards, the entry, probably there's a turnstile. Probably before you enter into the building, there are security guards, there are cameras. There, you also have to use your PIV badge or whatever badge, your key card to get into the building. Those are all examples of. But in terms of the categorization of the controls, there's administrative, technical, and physical control. Um, they are all implemented and employed just to provide privacy for the organization. So
Wow, sorry.
um,
I just looked up the OMBA 130 and it's 85 pages long.
yes, the OMB A130 is a key document, and most executive orders, a lot of directives, most of which comes from the CISA agency of the federal government, also provides that type of